Namaskar and good evening, everybody. I, on behalf of Wisdom Intellectual Forum, Puri, welcome all of you to the webinar series on Bhagavad Gita, scheduled to be held on 30 Saturdays, starting from today. We have with us Professor Pramod Kumar Das sir, lecturer and head, Nayagarh Autonomous College, Noida, who will address all the lectures in this webinar series. Recently, Chinmaya Mission Puri has organized a webinar series on Bhagavad Gita in Odia, wherein Professor Pramod Kumar Das was the speaker. It attracted a lot of people because of the clarity in the thought and expression of very difficult topics in Bhagavad Gita. I nearly attended all the webinars and I was really benefited by his lectures. Now, because of a demand from non-Odia people across the country that Professor Das thought of organizing the webinar series in Bhagavad Gita in English, and we took the platform of Wisdom Intellectual Forum Pool. It is from this platform that we will be having 30 webinars on Bhagavad Gita that will cover all the chapters from chapter 1 to 18. Hopefully, his lectures on Bhagavad Gita will greatly help all of us in understanding Bhagavad Gita in much more clarity and detail. With all best wishes to Professor Das, I request him to address on today's topic grief and relief from the chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita. Over to Professor Pramod Kumar Das for the lecture. Professor Das.
Am I audible, sir?
You are audible. You are audible.
Thank you. Respected Dr. Rao.
But you are not visible.
I am visible here.
Now visible. Visible.
Respected Dr. K.M. Naran Rao, the coordinator, moderator of this session. Very esteemed participants and respected members of Wisdom Intellectual Forum Puri. I thought of starting lecture series on the Bhagavad Gita in English for the benefit of the total audience, because when we were trying in our regional language, that was confined to our language only, our state only, but now it is open to all. How many people will view this program, how many people will interact this program, that does not matter, but the door is open to all. And I believe that by this process, I get to learn many things in course of teaching, in course of discussing the seminal concepts of the Bhagavad Gita from any source again and again, because it has no end. The pursuit of wisdom has no end. So the direct benefit will come to me that I shall be built up through this discussion. The fundamental source of human knowledge is the Vedas. There are 4 Vedas, as we all know, that are Rig Veda, Sam Veda, Yajur Veda, and Atharva Veda. And each Veda has 4 parts: Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka, and Upanishad. And Upanishad is the last part of the Veda, therefore it is called Vedanta. The essence of the Veda is recorded in the Upanishads. And the entire Vedic knowledge has been available to all of us in 3 forms, that is called Prasthanatraya, the Upanishads, Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita. And out of these 3 sources, Bhagavad Gita is found to be very lucid, very simple, very practical, very heart-touching, very interesting, and very engaging also. Because suppose you only go on studying Brahma Sutra, you may feel bored at a point. Similarly, in Upanishads also the same thing may happen. But when we discuss Bhagavad Gita again and again, we never feel bored, because it is so interesting. Because it speaks of our life. Because it is the manual of human living. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita is loved by everybody. As I said that Bhagavad Gita is the simplest form of wisdom that has been imparted to us through this literature, but it is grounded with the Upanishadic wisdom. It is not foreign to Upanishadic wisdom, it is grounded with the Upanishadic wisdom. But it is imparted in a very simplest form. So whenever we think of the Bhagavad Gita, we cannot avoid or we cannot ignore the Upanishadic wisdom. And that Upanishadic wisdom is clearly taught in every chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And out of that, we have designed 30 topics. And every topic is designed in such a way that we shall touch that Upanishadic wisdom. What the Upanishads claim? Upanishads claim that beyond the changes, behind and beyond the changes, there is an unchanging reality. This is the fundamental principle, fundamental truth claimed by the Upanishads. Because human knowledge is finite, Through that finite knowledge, man can see, man can perceive only the phenomenal world, only the world of pluralities, only the world of changes. But behind these changes, behind this world of pluralities, there is a primordial source, ultimate source, ultimate cause, ultimate principle, the common principle that we may call the totality. That principle which can explain the world of pluralities. That unchanging principle that can explain the world of changes, the changing world. Therefore, in Upanishads, truth is defined as that which cannot be defined, that which cannot be defined. Truth is defined as that which cannot be defined. Truth is described as indescribable. Because whenever we try to describe the truth in language, in feelings, in action, the truth remains undescribed, or truth is always indescribable, because we cannot describe the truth. Because any description leads to a contradiction. Therefore, truth is defined as satyam abadhitam. That means truth is that which cannot be contradicted by any other principle. If there is a predicate as the description of the subject, that predicate limits the subject. The predicate can't describe the subject in totality. So truth is indescribable. Similarly, consciousness, the ultimate principle of consciousness, Chetana, that is also indescribable. Human beings manage with quantitative pleasure and quantitative happiness, conditional pleasure and conditional happiness. So the infinite bliss, that bliss which is indescribable, that is also truth. That existence is indescribable, that consciousness is indescribable, and that bliss is also indescribable, because that these three are the common essence of the entire world of pluralities. When we speak of existence, we say that pot exists, table exists, chair exists, this world exists, but that existence is the common to all these subjects. Similarly, I am conscious, you are conscious, he is conscious, but consciousness is common to all the subjects. Similarly, bliss is common to all beings. That infinite bliss, that infinite existence, that infinite consciousness is that is truth, that is abadhitam, that is indescribable, that is the primary reality which can explain the world. From this Upanishadic wisdom, we can find three conclusions. Number one, that the soul or Atman is Nitya Mukta. Nitya Mukta means ever liberated. the soul, Satchitananda, Sat Chit or Ananda, that is not only Sat, that is not only Chit, that is not only Ananda, it is also ever liberated, Nitya Mukta. That means there is no agenda, there is no program for the salvation of the soul, because soul is ever liberated. This is the fundamental truth, or the teaching, or wisdom that we have to learn from the Upanishads, that soul is Nitya Mukta, Nityananda, 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 the सबबड़े the ever blissful. And that is the principle of existence. Atman does exist or does not exist. This question does not arise. Atman is the principle of existence. Atman is conscious or unconscious. This question does not arise. Atman is the principle of consciousness. Atman is happy or unhappy. That question does not arise. Atman is the principle of Ananda. That principle is ever liberated, Nitya Mukta. This is one. Second comes Jiva. Who is a Jiva? Jiva has four things. Jiva has a body, Jiva has mind, Jiva has intellect, and Jiva has ego. Mana, Sarira, Mana, Buddhi, Ahankara. These three things are not with Atman. Atman is beyond these four. Atman has no body, Atman has no mind, Atman has no Buddhi, Atman has no Ahankara. But what Atman has? Atman has infinite existence, infinite bliss, infinite consciousness, and liberation. It is ever liberated. Nitya Mukta, Nitya Mukta, Nitya Ananda. Omnipresent, Sarva Vidyamana, omniscient, Sarvagya, Nirakara, Nirguna, Abhyakta, Nirvikara, the unmanifest. Now, its counterpart is Jiva. Jiva is in bondage. Atman is ever liberated, and Jiva is ever bound. The just opposite. Jiva is ever bound because Jiva is conditioned by these four things. Jiva has a body, Jiva has a mind, Jiva has intellect, intelligence, and Jiva has Ahankar. The second point is, as soul is ever liberated, Nitya Mukta, similarly, the mind is ever equipoised, unagitated, tranquil, still, peaceful, sthira. What is the status of soul? Soul is ever liberated, Nitya Mukta. Similarly, the status of mind is, it is equipoised. It is a state of equanimity. It is a state of equilibrium. It is peaceful by nature. It is never agitated by its nature. This we have to remember. Then, if I identify myself with Atman, I gained that knowledge, then I should be happy, I should be obliged to know that I am ever liberated. Bondage cannot touch me. If I have a mind, then I shall be happy that I have a peaceful mind. I have an unagitated mind. If my mind is disturbed, its cause is something different. But I am gifted with a ready-made peaceful mind. As I am gifted with a ready-made liberated soul, similarly I am gifted with a ready-made equipoised mind, a mind of equanimity. That means today our topic is grief and relief. That means we are always in the state of relief. Our goal is not relief. Our source is also relief. What is my identity? If I am Atman, then that is a state of relief, not grief. That is a state of relief. Because it is Nitya Mukta. If I identify myself as my mind, that is also a state of relief. Because it is never agitated. Its nature is peace. Its nature is stillness. Its nature is poise. It is not disturbed at all. So my native stance is relief, not grief. But when I come in contact with the dynamics of body, mind, intellect, and ahankara, I become agitated. I remain in the state of grief. That means I jump from the state of relief to the state of grief. Grief is not my original status. My original status, as Upanishads declare, that is relief. I am always in the state of relief. But I experience grief. I make my mind agitated only because of when I come in contact with body, different dynamics of a mind, intellect, and the sense of egoism. That means the same mind which binds me, that also liberates. The same equipoised mind can be disturbed. That means the human existence can only be understood in two states of mind. One is grief or relief. Either your mind is in grief or relief. There is no third way. But what is our original status? Now, our original status is relief, not grief. What we have become? We have become grief. We have created that state of grief, frustration, distress, indecisiveness. pessimistic attitude. But our original status of mind is relief, not grief. So from relief, I have come. Again, from grief, I shall return to that relief state. So relief is the source, relief is the goal, and in between these two reliefs, we experience our life of grief. We can take an example. Between two sleeps, the waking state is the state of activities. That is the mixture of all types of experiences. We may call it grief. Between two sleeps, yesterday I slept, today I am sleeping. So between these two sleeps, I just experienced the dynamic life of activities, and that is grief. Similarly, I have come from the state of relief. I shall return to that state of relief. In between these two reliefs, I live my life of agitation, frustration, success, failure, pleasure, pain. Who is a wise person? He is a wise person, Dhira. He is a wise person. He is a man of wisdom who can remember the source and goal, both. He is never perplexed. He is never confused. The person who always remembers his source, where from he has come, and he knows the goal, where to go, then he will take the interval session as Maya, as appearance, as phenomenal. Because these 2 points are real, so between these 2 points, the entire session is the session of Maya or falsity or Vyavaharik, relatively true, not absolutely true. That means relief is natural, grief is unnatural. My natural state of mind is relief. Relief is that possibility. Because of this possibility, our mind can attain that state. Because relief is not the possible state which is impossible, which is not there, then our mind cannot reach that point. Because our mind is naturally in the state of relief, so by our personal effort or by studying scriptures or by following different instructions from our teachers, by controlling our mind, by following certain principles, we can reach that state because that state is potentially there. So that is the point. So always we are found with a state of relief, but we do not recognize that power of mind, that state of mind. We take it otherwise. We take it as if it is agitated. As if it is made so. In the Bhagavad Gita, except Lord Krishna, the minds of all were agitated. was not in the state of relief. The mind of Lord Krishna, the mind of Lord Krishna represents the mind of relief. And the minds of all people who were present in the battlefield, they were in the state of grief. They were in the state of agitation. You think of Karna, Bhishma, Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, Bhima, Bhishma, any character. We may take, for example, their minds were full of agitation for this reason or that reason, except Lord Krishna. Karna was worried about his identification, that I was not identified, and that was his grief. He was present in the battlefield only to take revenge against Arjuna or Pandavas. Draupadi was also not free from grief, state of grief, because I told you that mind has only two states, relief or grief, no third stage. Either I am in a relief state or in a grief state. So whatever may be the cause of grief, I am in a grief. If any external factor or internal cause can disturb my equipageness of mind or my tranquility of mind, that means I am in grief. Kama, Krodho, Lobho, Moho, any principle, if that is able to disturb my mind, then I am in grief, not in relief. Bhishma was also very much conscious about his pratigya. Karna was in problem. Duryodhana is still in problem. We think of Arjuna Visada Yoga. We think that the grief of Arjuna. We shall discuss how grief of Arjuna was a positive sign. It was positive. That is a sign of rationality. We shall discuss that. But what is about others who were present in the battlefield? Were they free from grief? Were they in the state of relief? Duryodhana was instigating his teacher, Acharya, Dronacharya, against Arjuna, that you see, he is your disciple. You taught him the secret of the warfare, but now he is in the opposite side and he is fighting with you. And you are a Brahmin, you do not know the technique of war, which is the cup of tea of a Kshatriya. So looking at the armies of Pandavas, Duryodhana was also disturbed because he was very much worried about the consequence, whether he will be defeated or he will win. Win means to win something, Hastinapur, the object. Karna was interested to take revenge, that I am insulted and I am with Duryodhana and I shall take revenge. All the minds were in the state of grief, they were agitated, they were disturbed, they were frustrated for this reason or that reason. And it is natural in the battlefield, because in the battlefield, the parties have not come here to celebrate anything happily. Warfield means that is a field of grief. So it is not that the Arjuna was only in the state of grief. But what was the difference between Arjuna's grief and the grief of others? Why it is said that Arjuna Visada Yoga? Can we say that any Visada, a state of a Visada, as a yoga? Visada, a state of distress, confusion, indecisiveness. How can it be called yoga? It appears to be contradictory. That Visada cannot be the state of yoga. Visada cannot help us uniting anything in the common sense, as we understand by Visada. But the first chapter is named as Arjuna Visada Yoga, the yoga of Arjuna's grief. Here I think relief is all right. If we understand, if we remember the very source of our mind, which is relief, if we are able to maintain that state of mind, if we can stay, if we can hold to that state of mind, that's all right. That was Lord Krishna. To some extent, Yudhishthira can be said to be that he was in the state of relief. Yudhishthira, that means who is sthira in Yuddha, in war. Whose mind is sthira in Yuddha, Yudhishthira. But any common man has a disturbing mind, has a disturbed mind, agitated mind, because he has expectations, he has different psychological propensities, Rama, Krodho, Lobho, Moho, all these things. Because I have a body, I have attachment for my body. Because I have mind, I have certain feelings, attachment. Because I have intelligence, so I have discriminative power, but sometimes that discriminative sense is lost in me. And because I have ahankara, the ego sense, that I think that I am the doer, I am doing everything. So these four things are sufficient to make me, to make my mind agitated, to make my mind disturbed. So Arjuna's grief can be said to be yoga because it is taken in the positive sense that Arjuna represents a rational mind. Duryodhana represents an ignorant mind or a dormant mind. Whatever may be the consequence, I shall fight. This may sound as a niskama karma, that whatever may be the consequence, I shall fight. This may also sound as ignorance. Suppose one will say, I shall fight whatever may be the consequence. A niskama karmi, a karma yogi can say this, can claim this. And also an ignorant person can claim this. If the person is not aware of the consequences, then he is ignorant. Many times we commit this mistake. We do something out of our desire, for the fulfillment of our desire, ignoring the consequences. That is a state of ignorance. I shall fight to win this battle. I shall fight to win Hastinapur. There is no second thought at all. I have come means I shall fight. but a rational mind asks questions. Because if I shall, because once the action is done, it is done. We cannot discuss, but there is no benefit if we discuss after getting the action done. Before we do an action, we should be rational enough to discuss, to think over it. What I am going to do is good or bad, is right or wrong, it is dharma or adharma. It may take some time. It may take some time, and naturally we do that in our practical life. Whenever we do something, we think twice, thrice, we discuss with others that this proposal is going to be held, whether it will be good or bad. Suppose a marriage proposal will come. We discuss with our family members. We think over it, and we think it from different perspectives, whether it will be good or bad. That is the rational attitude. Because once the marriage is done, it is done. After the marriage, there is no value of discussion. That discussion will be useless. So discussion is only useful before doing an action. Therefore, Arjuna was disturbed because Arjuna was rational, and Arjuna was asking the question that what I am going to do, whether it is dharma or adharma, it is good or bad, it is right or wrong. Duryodhana is ready to fight, and all others are ready to fight. When we think twice, we give a chance to our mind to think twice, to rethink. That rethinking ability is rationality. That we should have a scope for review, to rethink. Even if it is thought of very nicely, still there is a chance of rethinking, reviewing. What I am going to do is right or wrong, is good or bad. Arjuna did that. Arjuna asked Lord Krishna that to land on the middle of the both of the parties, so that I shall see with whom I am going to fight. This is an attitude of inquiring about the consequences. When we do an action, we become very much interested in the consequences, which is not good, which we should not. So, in the battlefield, when Arjuna requested Lord Krishna to place the chariot in the middle, so that he can see with whom he is going to fight, that means he is interested to see the consequences. What will happen after this war? What shall I get? What is the purpose of this war? If war will not take place, what will happen? Whether I am doing this out of infatuation, out of ignorance, whether I can break this, whether this war can be cancelled, can be postponed, whether there can be a negotiation between these two parties for the higher benefit. This type of agitation, this type of grief is a positive sign, because it is the attitude of a rational mind. Therefore, Arjuna's Visada leads to yoga. Because if these questions will not come to the mind, there will be no discussion at all. If Arjuna will not ask such questions, then there will be no chapters. No second chapter, no third chapter, no fourth chapter, no chapter at all. So that attitude of asking question, what, how and why is a rational aptitude. Therefore, Arjuna's grief is called Arjuna Visada Yoga. That is a rational attitude. That is very much necessary for a rational mind. So there are three minds. One is the ignorant mind, one is the rational mind, and the other is the transrational mind or transcendental mind, that is Lord Krishna. Three minds. One is the ignorant mind, that is the mind of Duryodhana, who is ready to fight at the cost of any consequences. The other mind is the inquiring mind. The mind is asking question, what is dharma and what is adharma. One party is ready to fight, the other party is not ready to fight. These are the two states of mind. But these two states of mind is witnessed by the higher mind, the transcendental mind, that is Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna is watching the whole scene, that they are ready to fight. There means the one mind is ready to fight without any question. One mind is asking question, that is confused. And the higher mind is watching these two minds, that is the transcendental mind. Arjuna is interested in dharma. What is dharma? What is adharma? Lord Krishna is not interested in dharma. Lord Krishna is interested in dharma in a particular place, time and person. Dharma has two meanings. Suppose we shall take one principle as dharma, and if we do not know its applicability, in what place, in what time this dharma is meaningful, then we are dharmandha. So the mind, the transcendental mind, which is beyond these two dichotomies, that dharma and adharma, that mind can understand what is dharma in a particular place, in a particular time, and for a particular person. What we call applied ethics. Suppose for the Pandava brothers, they respect their elder brother. That is dharma. That the younger brother should pay respect to the elder brother. But when Draupadi was getting nuded in the assembly, Rajya Sabha, then they remained silent because they followed one dharma and they neglected another dharma, that it was also their duty to protect an woman from being naked, from being nuded. So when we stick to one dharma at the cost of other dharmas, that we are dharmandha. And this problem is with everybody in Mahabharata. So our mind should go beyond the polarities, beyond the dichotomies, thesis and antithesis, dharma and adharma. That mind can understand what is, yes, you understand what is dharma, but what is dharma in a particular place. If it is dharma in a particular time, then that is also adharma in another time. If one principle is dharma in a particular place, that is also adharma in another place. This dichotomy can be understood by that transcendental mind. Therefore, Lord Krishna was silent. In the next session, we shall discuss. War ethics. That whenever there is a war, it is not an accidental affair. It is not an accident. It has certain ethics we shall discuss. That in a war situation, if both the parties are not ready to fight, there cannot be any war. They have to wait. Now Arjuna is not ready to fight. That means war cannot start. So this war of Mahabharata is only symbolic. Here we are discussing about the war of different minds. Situation is one, that is the war situation. Everybody is ready to fight. But there are three minds. One mind is ready to fight at any cost. The other mind is asking question whether this action will be good or bad. And another mind, that is the transcendental mind, who is witnessing the whole situation. That you, Arjuna, you belong to one form, you think you are the agent, you are going to kill them. And he is Duryodhana, he also thinks that he will fight and will win Hastinapur. You both are wrong from the cosmic vision, because the wicked persons are already killed and the virtuous are awarded. Neither Arjuna nor Duryodhana are the real agents. They are only instruments. The cosmic order can be understood by the cosmic mind, the transcendental mind. So Arjuna is a relative mind, Duryodhana is another, Duryodhana also is a relative mind, but the absolute mind, the complete understanding is Lord Krishna. Therefore, there is a need of psychological training that is called yoga. That means the agitated mind, the frustrated mind, the disturbed mind, the indecisive mind of every person should be cultured, should be groomed to be a full-fledged mind, to be a transcendental mind, to be a mind of relief, because that is our source. From that we have come, to that we shall reach. So this is life where we live with grief and frustration. This is temporary. This can be eradicated. This can be removed by education, proper education, by sadhana, spiritual sadhana. That is the goal of this teaching of Bhagavad Gita. That Arjuna represents a common man, that every common man is a rational man, and every rational man tends to ask certain questions. Every rational man tends to doubt, because philosophical reflections start from doubting everything, as Descartes said. Descartes did in his philosophy. So Arjuna doubts, and that doubting faculty is necessary, is very urgent. If no rational mind will doubt, then no philosophical reflection, no conclusion will come out. So doubting is the starting point of a philosophical reflection. Yes, I shall doubt whether this phenomenal world is real or unreal. So we have an agitated mind, we have a disturbed mind, we have to live this life this life is just like a war. This life represents war. The fighter represents the mind. So how can I live this life with my mind, with my agitated mind, disturbed mind? That is the problem. Therefore, this mind can be educated. This mind can be educated. This mind can be educated by three ways. Number one is metaphysics. Number two is sociology. And number three is ethics. And Bhagavad Gita has given emphasis upon these three things. If the mind is in grief, how can it be educated? How can it be cultured? By three ways. Number one is metaphysics. That means the mind should be taught, the mind should be trained with the metaphysical inputs, whether this phenomenal world is real or unreal. What is the ultimate truth? Who will die? Suppose you are going, you think that you will kill them. Whether the soul can be killed or not. Whether body is killed or the soul is killed. Whether there is birth, rebirth. Such things are metaphysical questions. Every mind should learn that. So the entire Bhagavad Gita, in many chapters, we are taught of metaphysics regarding the status of the phenomenal world, regarding the status of the nominal world, regarding Brahma, Atman, all these things we shall discuss. And by that way, mind will be groomed, mind will be cultured. Number one. Number two, sociology. We live in a society. Therefore, we have certain social obligations. So, dharma and adharma are discussed in a social phenomena. What is my swadharma? What is paradharma? What is lokasangraha? What is charity, dana, etc. All these things one should learn. Our mind should be social also. Our mind should know the metaphysics, should know the sociology. The entire Bhagavad Gita is based upon the sociological disciplines. That what is my swadharma in my society, in a particular platform. What to do and what not to do. And the third discipline is ethics, that is moral teaching. Ethics is of two types, traditional ethics and applied ethics. Traditional ethics means it is generally discussed what is good and what is bad. Applied ethics means we have to be contextual. That in which context this particular action is judged as good or bad. And the entire Bhagavad Gita is rooted in contextualism, that is applied ethics, not with traditional ethics. So the transcendental mind is aware of the contextual ethics, that he is aware of all the contexts. Context of Arjuna, context of Duryodhana, context of Bhima or others, then context of Bhishma and others. He is aware of all the contexts. These five brothers were there in the Raj Sabha, but the transcendental mind was ready to protect Draupadi because that mind observes the totality, the whole reality, the whole cosmic order. So mind has three steps: ignorance, then intelligence, then supramental state or trans-rationality, we can say. So this is the journey of life. Ignorance, then we shall become rational. Rational mind will ask questions for clarity. Then after getting clarity, we shall go beyond that, that is trans-rational or supramental state. And from that we have come, and to that we shall go. So relief is very natural state of mind. Grief is our creation. We have made our mind. We have created this atmosphere. We have created our world of grief. This is our creation. But I am really in the state of relief only. So from grief to relief is the journey of life, and that is the purpose of life. That how can how can the jiva who is in grief can attain the state of relief permanently, because that was the source from which we all have come. This is the first part of discussion of chapter 1, where I discussed that the Bhagavad Gita is rooted in the Upanishadic wisdom, that is an unchanging principle amidst all the world of pluralities, and that is Atman, and that is Nitya Mukta, ever liberated. Second part is Jiva, who has a body, mind, intellect, and ego, and that Jiva is also gifted with a mind which nature is equipoised, which is always in the state of relief. These two things we are gifted with: an ever liberated soul within us, and an ever equipoised mind. But coming in contact with this body, coming in contact with the mind, intelligence, and ego, coming in contact with this phenomenal world, we have made our mind bound, or we have chosen the state of the grief. From that we should be relieved. That is the goal, and that we shall discuss in the following chapters. And the second part of the first chapter, that is war ethics. If there is utterly war, what is the ethics of that activity? We shall discuss in the next session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Pramod Kumar Das, for the opening lecture in the Bhagavad Gita series. Very nicely you have discussed man's state of grief and relief. If I look into the chat box, first of all, let's see. We have a question from Sravani Mishra. She wants to know, you see, mind is always in a conflicting state of, there is a tussle in the mind between grief and relief. Though you say that mind is naturally in the state of relief, but due to number of external factors that mind is guided through or guided by, it falls into the state of grief. So by and large, mind is always found itself in a state of grief. So there is a tussle, but the natural state is the state of being free from all sort of grief and being relieved from grief. So there is always a tussle in the mind between grief and relief. So how does mind overcomes this grief and reaches itself or puts itself in the path of relief? Well, you have said to this But briefly again, please reply to the question made by Shravani Mishra. Hello, am I audible or not?
Achha, okay. Now am I audible?
Oh, you are audible. Did you get my point or not? Did you get my point?
No, yes, I got. The question is a very good question, but it is already told by me that grief is our own creation. We have created our grief. Grief is our mental construction. Grief is relative. What you call as your grief, that may not be a grief for others. And even if you change your mind, your grief will not remain as your grief. That is your mental construction. Anyway, and how it happens to you? Because you have certain expectations, you have desires, you have attachment with this world. If these desires are not fulfilled, if your expectations are not fulfilled, you live in a state of grief only. You can experience that when you are going to sleep. Suppose you slept very well in the night. What is that state? That is a state of grief or relief? If you feel the state of relief in sleep, and if you practice to live that state in the waking states, then you can do that. You can live that state in the waking states. If I am relieved in my sleeping state, if I shall try to enjoy that state even in my waking states, you can do this. So try to do that, because grief, the situations of grief are the situations that are created by your own effort, by your own interest, by your own mindset, by your own frustration, by your own mental construction. You are the creator of your grief. So just change your mind. Just change your mind. So for that, how can you change your mind? It is a long course. We shall discuss 18 chapters. But that is divided into 3 types. You can change your mind by knowing metaphysics. You can change your mind by knowing sociology. You can change your mind by knowing ethics. The Bhagavad Gita, these 3 things have been focused. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita is the manual of human living, because it gives focus. It focuses on social living of people. When we shall discuss what is Swadharma, my dharma. This is dharma in general. But what is my dharma? My dharma means it is contextual. Oh, you taught me that what is good, what is bad. But you don't support me in a particular situation what I meet every day, every time. Suppose you are driving. You know driving, but on the road, many situations will come. In a particular situation, how shall you drive? That is the context. Similarly, society is the context where you have to execute your values. So, knowledge of values is theoretical. You have to know the metaphysics, but you have to apply that the metaphysical wisdom in social living. So there is discussion about sociology in Bhagavad Gita. And then comes morality or ethics. So by these 3 teachings, teachings of metaphysics, teachings of sociology, and teachings of ethics, our mind can be groomed, and it will be done gradually. Overnight, because that is the whole target. Two states only, relief and grief. I added one more, that you were in the state of relief, that is your original home. That is your original abode. That you are in the state of relief. It is gone. Now you find yourself as in the state of grief. Then you have to return. You have to return to that state of relief. So relief is not the goal. Relief is that goal which was your source. Nobody can you make you happy because you are yourself happy. You find that happiness within you. Nobody can make you happy except you. That happiness is within you. You discover that. So if my mind will be, if my mind will be relieved, then it will go to heaven. No. If my mind will be relieved, it will come to its own status, own stance. Because my mind is not disturbed at all. I have a very beautiful mind. It is disturbed because of my own attachment, my own ignorance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Das. So very nicely pointed out that sleep is a great relief. That we sleep soundlessly is a great indicator to say that we have a relief from the day-long bodily and mental pain. So there is an agitation in the mind, and the agitation has to end up in sleep. So this suggests that though there is a tussle in the mind between grief and relief, there is an exit wall to grief to find a path to relief. Thank you. Thank you very much for your very beautiful answer. I don't see any more question in the chat box, but if anybody wants to put any question, they can unmute themselves and ask the question. I will wait for half a minute. If anybody wants. I don't see any question in the chat box. If anybody wants to ask any sort of clarification or make a suggestion, they are welcome. Well, I don't see anybody unmuting. So what I see from the entire lecture of Professor Pramod Kumar Das is he has made a very nice attempt to enter into the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, wherein he tried to make a discussion on grief and relief. But prior to that, he said that it is the Upanishadic wisdom that is expressed in much clear terms in the Bhagavad Gita. The idea behind the entire Bhagavad Gita is to explain that there is an unchanging eternal principle behind everything that we see in this finite world. This finite world is just, we cannot confine ourselves to this finite world. There is a world behind this finite world that is the real world that we should know. And in order to make this point very much clear, he has very nicely made a distinction between Jiva and Atman. So this distinction normally we do not find so comfortably explained the way Professor Das has explained, because he has clearly pointed out that Jiva has four things. Jiva has a body, Jiva has a mind, Jiva has an intellect, and Jiva has an ego. So these are the four things that when we associate with ourselves, we are Jiva, we are not Atman. When we take away all this, we are pure Atman. And he very nicely pointed out that Jiva is bound because Jiva is identifying itself with these four: body, mind, intellect, and ego. But when you talk of Atman, of the soul, it is ever liberated, it is Nitya Mukta, it is never bound, it is never free. But the problem is we do not recognize the true nature of our own self. We identify ourselves with the Jiva, not the Atma. So there lies the entire problem. And then he said, having said this, he said even the mind in its natural state is always peaceful. It is in a state of tranquility. But it gets agitated because of our own creation. So agitation in the mind, or any sort of disturbance in the mind, any sort of chaos, any sort of disuniformity or distress or pain or confusion in the mind, it is all an artificial creation on our part. If you take the mind in its original nature, mind is ever free. Mind is free from all sort of pains. It is free from a state of grief. It is always in a state of relief. But the problem is we do not identify, we do not recognize our true nature of mind. So there lies the problem. Now, while coming to the actual discussion on grief and relief, he said that though mind is always in a state of relief, we accidentally create grief in our life, and then we try to get rid of this grief, and then again move to try to attain that relief. So, having said this, one important thing that he has pointed out, that the source of everything is relief, and the end of everything is relief. The source of everything is relief, and the end of every pain, every grief is again relief. So one important equation that we can frame out from the talk of Professor Das, that the source and the end is one. The source and the end is one. It is the state of relief. The source is the state of relief, and the end that we are going to is the state of relief. In between, it is all grief, it is all pain. It is not naturally there, it is all created by our own selves. So, very nicely said that man is, or the mind of a man is always in a state of relief. We create grief for ourselves because of our association with different things, different possibilities, different thinking of various consequences, because of our own desires. So, because of a number of factors, we add in grief to our own mind. Otherwise, mind in its own true nature is free from all grief. It is always in a state of relief. We never try to understand this. So, very nice equation that we can frame out from the talk of Professor Das is that the source and the goal is one, and that is nothing but relief. The pain, it is all in between. It is all our creation. So how to get rid of this grief, how to get rid of this pain? So he has even suggested that mind can be trained from the metaphysical standpoint, from the sociological standpoint, and also from the ethical standpoint. Well, I am not going into the details because we have already discussed. From metaphysical standpoint, if you understand that the Jiva is not real, it is the Atman that is real. So that knowledge will rid our mind from all sort of grief and pain. And from the sociological point, we say that there is always a point to question something, think of what is dharma and what is adharma. And always going on by the path of swadharma will always lead one to a path of relief from all sorts of grief. And then he talked of ethics, and while talking of ethics, he said, whatever we know, that must be applied in our lives. Knowing one thing but not applying is not really living. It is having no knowledge instead. So having a knowledge, you have to go by that knowledge, and that is your true swadharma. Then he, while making an analysis of mind, he talks of the three states of mind. One is the ignorant mind, the second is the rational mind, and then another is the final one is the transcendental mind. So very beautifully he had made a classification, and he brought in the characters from the Mahabharata. Duryodhana's mind is ignorant mind. It is a tamasic mind. It is ignorant. It is not thinking of anything. Only one thing, that there will be war and I am going to be victorious. The ego, the sense of ego sense, the ego sense in a tamasic mindset, that is represented by Duryodhana. He knows only war, only fighting, only war, not thinking of anything. It is an ignorant mind. It is an irrational mind. So that is one state of mind represented by Duryodhana. And then we come to a rational mind represented by Arjuna, where he thinks of various things what will happen after the war, whether what would be the consequences that follow, whether I should go to the war or not. Many innocent lives will be killed. So these are the questions that ponder in the mind of a rational mind. So what he thinks of what is dharma and what is adharma, whether it would be right on his path to go on the path of war. So these are the questions that come to a rational mind. This is the higher state of mind, and well, we can think of this mind as a state of confused mind. Sometimes we may say, because too much of dwelling on something puts us in a sort of dilemma, a sort of confusion. That's why Saraj also pointed the first chapter. It is Visada Yoga, and and he has very nicely justified how can Visada be associated with yoga, because if you take Visada in a positive sense, a confusion, showing a path to get rid of confusion. That's how yoga comes into play. So Visada Yoga is taken in a positive. Visada is taken in a positive sense to come out of that confusion, to come out of that state of distress, that state of dilemma, to pave a path for future course of action. And then he talked of the transcendental mind that is represented by Sri Krishna, who is free from all sorts of troubles. It is a clear mind, it is a crystal clear mind. It is the mind that Sar was talking in the beginning itself. It is the mind free from all grief. It is the mind free from all pain. It is the mind free from all confusion. It is the mind of pure relief, pure tranquility, pure perfect bliss and peace. That is the state of mind represented by Arjun. Sorry, by Sri Krishna. So when he has brought in three characters, we do have all the three minds. We are sometimes ignorant, then out of ignorance we do commit certain mistakes, then we realize our mistakes when our mind elevates to the level of that rationality, and then even beyond rationality we sometimes attain a state of a tranquil mind, a peaceful mind, what we say the sthira mind, a mind of perfect peace, a perfect bliss. So that is the mind, the highest mind that talks of, and that is the mind where we have no grief at all. It is a state of perfect peace, perfect relief. Indeed, a very nice equation that we can point out from Sir's lecture is that the source and the goal are one. In between we are. In between there is pain. In between there is distress. In between there is ego, there is pain, there is ahankar, all drama going on in this world. But if you look at the source and if you look at the goal, the source and the goal are one. So very nice thing that you have said, sir, from this first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Well, it was really a great talk, because you said that man is by nature has a mind of relief, a mind of tranquility, a mind of peace. The disturbance that we see in this world, it is all the creation on our part. So we should treat, there is always a tussle between grief and relief, and we need to recognize that our mind in its original state is the state of relief. And if we do this, there will be no tussle, there will be peace all around. Thank you very much, sir, for your very nice lecture. I'm really benefited by this, and definitely I feel all the participants today might have been definitely benefited by your talk. Let me see something. Somebody has said something. It is by Sarita Satipati. She wants to know the discussion about. Okay. No, it's only a compliment. It's only a compliment, because you have talked of three minds and you took in the characters from the Mahabharata to represent the three states of mind that we have. So Sarita Satipati, she says, well, it's a very good exemplifier from your side to explain the state of mind. Very nicely done, sir. Thank you. Thank you, the question raisers. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of this webinar series. And today is the first webinar, and very nice webinar it was. Now it's time for calling Srimati Swarnalata Tripathi Madam to propose a formal vote of thanks. Or to Srimati Swarnalata Tripathi Madam.
Namaskar to all. Audible? Audible?
You are audible, madam. You are audible. Audible. Namaskar, madam. You are audible.
Thank you. Respected participants, I thank all the participants for their participation in the first Gita lecture program. Your presence is our inspiration. I thank Dr. Rao sir for coordinating, moderating, and giving a beautiful concluding note. I thank Pramod sir for delivering a beautiful talk on grief and relief. I thank you all and hope your participation in the Gita lecture series on every Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, madam, for being the actual soul behind this webinar series. So, number of people will be benefited by this series, by the lucid talk of Pramod sir. So, it's a great effort from the part of Pramod sir and also from your side. So, I thank both of you and all the participants for being a part of this webinar series. Thank you all. Now the meeting is closed. Thank you very much, and see you next week for the war ethics from chapter 1 in the coming Saturday. Thank you all, and hope to see you all coming Saturday. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Good night, everybody.